his partner, lived in Dumont and had a separate area where he could work, and so my father very often worked there with him.
And then he would come home to Teaneck for dinner?
And then he'd come home for dinner, right? And after dinner he'd take a quick nap, and then a shower, and into the tuxedo, and he'd play music for the evening. And he played trombone and piano. And so he did that. He was out most evenings because he was playing music somewhere. Sometimes theaters in New York or locally, and he was a busy man.
He played for weddings and things?
Oh yes.
What was the name of his orchestra?
The Elite.
The Elite Orchestra.
E-L-I-T-E.
And did they ever
Elite.
play on the radio?
Oh yes. They would have been on television had it been around then.
Oh, I see. So did they go
It was
into...
back in Paul Whiteman days, you know.
Did they go into New York to play?
Yes.
And that's when they were on the radio.
Mm-hmm. Right. And he enjoyed that. My father just enjoyed being busy. He was a talented man, and very good to us. If he was booked to supply music for an excursion on the Hudson River, which was very common in those days. Lots of churches and other organizations had their summer picnics up in Bear Mountain, New York, and they would rent an excursion on the Hudson River Dayliner.
That's right, I remember that.
And he would take the whole family. He checked all of these occurrences, because if it was a good group of people going on this trip, on this cruise, he would buy tickets and take us along too. So we could be there and enjoy seeing him playing his music, and we'd have a picnic at Bear Mountain, you know, just like everybody else. And he participated with us as best he could. He was a great father. My mother was a typical housekeeper.
All right, wait a minute. So tell us about your mother.
Mom she was one of 5 children. She had an older sister who was a nurse. But Mom just kind of kept company with her mother, and they would go into New York City every Monday, evidently.
Where did they live?
They lived in Union City, New Jersey.
And what about before then? Where was she from?
Who, my grandmother?
No, well, your mother. Where did she live before Union City?
Union Hill.
Didn't she live in Brooklyn? So tell us about your mother.
My mother was an at-home girl. She was never a student, but she graduated from grammar school. I guess that was pretty much the pattern in those days. And when she did that, she just stayed at home. Her mother my grandmother enjoyed going into New York and shopping every Monday. She went to Macy's, and my grandmother was happy to have her daughter go along with her.
Did she have any brothers or sisters?
She had one sister, Elsie, Frey, Elsie Frey, who lived in Scarsdale, New York. She was married, had a daughter and a son.
But at home, when your mother was young, she had one sister and...
One sister.
And what else?
And her mother and
She
father.
had other brothers?
She had 3 brothers.
Yes.
Yes.
And one sister.
One sister, Elsie. You want the boys' names? The oldest was Bill, Uncle Bill. lived in North Bergen with his family. He had one daughter, Helen, who was older than I was, so I never knew them very well, very much. And Myrtle was Elsie's daughter up in New Rochelle.
And who were her other brothers?
Let's see. Ed was a fireman in Union City.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so proud of him when I was a child. I was so proud of him because he drove the hook and ladder in the back seat. And anytime I heard a fire engine, I stopped where I was to see who was driving the hook and ladder that day.
So there was Tom, Elsie, Bill, and one more?
Bill and Elsie and Hap.
Hap, and his name was
His name
what?
was Harry R. Dunham.
So he was
after his
had the
father.
same name as his father.
Yes. But he was always called Hap because that's what he was, happy. He was wonderful. And we were fortunate in later years when we moved from New Jersey to Teaneck, New Jersey. Hap and his family were living just 2 blocks from us. And it was great for all of us because I was old enough to babysit their 3 children. And we were close enough, I could babysit for them and I could go with them when Cassie, their mother, was taking a shopping trip. She'd ask me to go along and help see that the 3 children stayed where they were supposed to be while we were shopping. And then I babysat for them all the time. And we were just close. We enjoyed being near them.
So that was your mother's family.
My mother's brother.
Now how about your father? He had a sister, didn't he?
Yeah, my father had a sister named Helen, I guess.
Helena.
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 And they were always close. And they moved to, they lived in Sheepshead Bay, New York. And then they moved to North Carolina, bought a farm down in North Carolina. But we would go down and visit them every summer. We'd go down there for a week to Oriental, North Carolina. And we were very close. We stayed close pretty much with all the families. And,
so you spent a lot of summer vacations in North Carolina?
oh yes, every summer we went down there for at least a week, sometimes longer.
Mm-hmm. And what was Helena's husband's job?
Well, he became a farmer when he bought all those acres down there in Oriental, North Carolina.
And
He
what
was
did
the one who bought them.
And what did he do in Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn, they lived on a yacht. Beautiful yacht. And the half of the hull, I think that's the right term, half of the hull was his machine shop. And he tended to owners of fishing boats. They would come to his boat for repairs. And he did that in Sheepshead Bay, New York. And so we would go over there and visit very often. And we'd stand there and park the car on the street and whistle over to the family in the boat, and then one of the boys would get into one of their boats and come ashore.
This was at Sheepshead Bay?
Sheepshead Bay, which is close to Coney Island. You know where that is. Coney Island, New York.
So then they moved to North Carolina.
Uncle Paul went down by himself.
Uncle Paul and...
He went down by himself first. I think he took the boat down. Exactly to where, I'm not sure. I was too young then to remember it now. But he went down there on a boat, and bought 60 acres of property in Oriental, and actually at that time it was an island because you had to get on a boat to go over to what he bought. But he bought this property and decided he was going to have a farm. So his family stayed with us in Union City while he was down in North Carolina buying his property.
And then he worked repairing boat engines and so forth?
Yes. He sailed his yacht where they had lived for years in New York. He sailed that down with, I think, his two oldest sons went with him, and they got the boat down there and lived on the boat while they built a pier and a little workshop right on the water's edge. And then after they got that built, then they sold the boat, I suppose, and he built a house for them right on that point of land. So then we went down there every year to visit with him. He established his own farm. He built his own smokehouse. Built, what else do you need in a new home where there's no water, no facilities, no telephone?
And what were the names of their children?
The oldest was Paul, who never did go to North Carolina. He was then grown, and he lived in Sheepshead Bay. I guess he had a house or a home, but he stayed there because, as I said, he was older and he had friends there and so forth. His life was there, not in North Carolina. So we lost Paul in a way. But then after Paul was Herbert, who was a couple years older than I was. Herbert and Eddie. And then later, considerably later, my aunt had another son, Ralph, who was still in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And I really never met Ralph.
Now Herbert, was it Herbert that continued the boat engine repair business?
Yes.
And Eddie was a fishing boat captain?
Yes. Yes.
And Ralph, you said, was in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
So after high school, Mom, what did you do for work?
Oh, I went to employment agencies in New York and then also in New Jersey. And didn't take too long, I guess. I had a job with an attorney in in Teaneck. And I stayed there for 2 years, and then I wanted more money, and then I went to another attorney for 2 years, and no, that one was for 6 years. I stayed there 6 years. The second job.
As a legal secretary?
Legal secretary, both places. They were attorneys, and then I went to. My mind goes blank. I was in Teaneck for 2 years, and then in Englewood. I worked in Englewood. Another attorney for 6 years, and then the war broke down. And everybody was, my current job was for an attorney who was married but had no children, so he was a good suspect, a good attorney, good serviceman, and anyway, I was 2 years and then 6 years and then 2 years for an attorney in Newark. That was while your father was in the Army Air Corps, and he was based in Newark, New Jersey. And that worked out well because the attorney I then worked for was in Newark. So I found an apartment for us in Orange, which is outside Newark. Do you remember that area at all, Orange, New Jersey?
Yes.
Found a nice apartment there.
Now, Dad was working in the Army, but as I remember it, he had the same job that he did as a civilian.
That's right.
And what was it that he did?
He knew, I don't know what the technical proper term is, but he knew where every ship of ours was. He knew the location of each of our ships, and he knew what was on every ship.
Ah, so he was some kind of a expediter or director of shipping.
I don't know the proper term, but that's what he did. And
he worked in Newark.
He worked in
At the
Newark
Port of Newark.
at the Port Authority, yes. And then temporarily he was sent to Virginia Beach. He and his major, Jim Birch, and another sergeant along with your father, the three of them were sent down to Virginia Beach to establish another area for this same kind of work.
Dad was a sergeant.
Your father was a sergeant, right? And it was then while he was traveling back and forth sometime, and I got a job in Newark at that time. Again for an attorney, another lawyer, and I would go down to Virginia Beach once in a while for a weekend, and your father would come home. We saw each other, you know. And anyway, at that time I became pregnant with you. And so that changed everything. And, but I knew the doctor I wanted, and she was in Hackensack. And my sister had recommended her, and I'd heard about her from other people too. She was a baby specialist. And so I went to her, and she took care of me for a while, and then she said, I think you should go to, and she said, don't forget the Army's paying for this. You're not. So you were free for us.
So you went to the doctor in Hackensack.
In Hackensack on Anderson Street.
And I was born in Hackensack.
You were born in Hackensack Hospital.
But you were living in East Orange.
Yes.
Which is quite a trip. How did you
Well,
get...
that's what the doctor said. This is such a trip, I worry about you. So
how did you manage to
I said, well, what I'm planning to do, if I figure right, is to stay with my parents in Teaneck at the end. And then, so then she felt better, because but that's what happened.
So that was 1945. The war was just about over then.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, and then Dad, I guess, got out of the Army Air Corps.
Yeah.
And where did you settle then?
Well, his job was open for him in Springfield, Ohio.
So he went back to
So
International Harvester.
International Harvester.
And so then we moved to Springfield, Ohio.
Yes.
For how long? A couple of years?
No, not that long. We went out there immediately after Christmas. You were a new baby. But we three drove out to Springfield, Ohio, where your father would be working, and a friend of ours, actually, it was his boss. I can't think of their names right at the minute. But his boss also came from New Jersey, so we'd known each other for some time before this timing, you know. And they had found a house for us to rent, which was lovely, in Springfield. And we had a lovely place with a garden, vegetable garden. That was our first vegetable garden out there. But you were about 6 months old when we went out there. Took our car, and we left right after the holidays, so that worked out well. We were at home in New Jersey for the holidays, and then we took off. And we were there for a while, but we were not too happy. I don't believe I talked about it or complained about it, but the local people were cold. And of course I was busy with you, But we had one family, 2 doors from us, who had a son just your age. So you two became playmates. So that was the main thing. You had somebody, to spend time with.
And then you moved from there back to New Jersey?
Well, yes, your father finally decided he was not happy with what was happening out there. He had gone there evidently with the hope that he would go from there, Ohio, to Chicago, to their main office. And he could see whatever went on, I don't know, but he could see that wasn't going to happen. And then by that time he'd been talking with, what's his name, the International Truck Nash Car dealer in Ridgefield, New Jersey, was a friend of your father's. And he also bought the trucks, Dad would be talking to him. And he, arranged sometimes to get a special order out to delivered to New Jersey. In fact, there were times when we got into a truck and delivered it. You and Dad and I.
What kind of a truck was this? International Harvester?
Yeah, International. Yeah. So we made a number of trips to deliver. It gave us a free weekend to visit our families, back here, especially on a weekend, if it was a holiday weekend.
And then after International Harvester, where did Dad work?
Well, the dealer in New Jersey offered him a job.
And that was Muter Brothers in Richfield?
Right. They also sold cars, as I said, and we bought a car or 2 from him.
So were we living up in Dumont at that time, or were we elsewhere?
I guess we could have been. It's hard for me to. I'd need more time to think that one through. But in the meantime, he'd been doing these other home visits, to sell products. He was working.
That's right. He was working for Stanley
Stanley
Home Products.
It was brushes, wasn't it?
Well, it was
Brushes
like the Fuller Brush Company,
Yeah.
except it was Stanley, and they sold brushes and other home products, cleaning products.
Right.
And so Dad would sell that in his spare time, and you would deliver it.
On Saturdays we would deliver all these purchases and have lunch out. That was our special treat.
So was the next step then into insurance at that point?
I guess so. Well, it was more than that, more involved than that. We had friends, June and Johnny Mendez. We knew them from school in Teaneck. June was in my class in Teaneck High School. June Mendez and her husband, Johnny, was a little bit older than I was. But we ran into them accidentally one day, and they said, "Let's get together." We never see each other. They had just got married about the same time we did, We had the same schools. We lived in Teaneck, so we started seeing each other. We'd have dinner and then play cards. They were going to teach us to play bridge. That's what it was. They were bridge fiends. So the first time we tried to have a lesson, it was about the time war was breaking out, and Johnny was cold.
You mean the Korean War?
No, well, was that the Korean War?
Yes.
Okay, if you say so.
That came after World War II.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, World War II doesn't fit. But Johnny was an ensign, and he was sent out into the islands, I guess. And your father, of course, was fortunate enough to do the kind of work that was important to the Army, too, because they needed to know where all their units were, and that's what he was doing for International Trucks. Keeping an eye on orders for truck deliveries,
Yes.
What stage of they'd reached and when would the thing be delivered.
Yes.
And we delivered a couple of things, just us. And Dad would, we'd all 3 get in the front seat, in a truck. And I remember people looking at us as we passed them on the road, you know, and see a woman sitting there with a little guy, you know.
So you found yourself in a truck.
Yes.
Making deliveries.
That's right.
To different buyers of the trucks.
Yes, yes. Or sometimes to a body shop maybe, because there was just the frame behind the cab of the truck, and there was a body on order under what's the word I want? Anyway, there was a body waiting for it back in New Jersey. And one time I remember we had our car mounted on the back of a truck cab. And my husband drove the cab from the cab, and we all sat in the front seat. We had some interesting trips.